Alpha King escorts the Omega into Shadowlands, yet the shadows bow to her far deeper power. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Emily Ashmore had always been different. Her pale skin, the color of ivory under the moonlight, blended with the shadows of the village she called home. But it wasn't just her appearance that set her apart, it was the void inside her, the absence of the wolf spirit that every Omega should possess. Unlike the other Omega girls, Emily had never experienced the thrill of transformation, the deep bond with the wolf within her. In a world ruled by strength and dominance, she was nothing but a reminder of what it meant to be weak. Her family had given up on her long ago, leaving her to fend for herself. In the eyes of the pack, she was a broken piece, discarded like an old relic. The whispers of her defect followed her wherever she went. The broken Omega, they called her, and she learned to wear the title like a second skin. Every full moon, the village gathered for the annual selection ceremony. It was a day when the strongest and most capable alphas chose their mates, the Omega females who would stand by their side. Emily, however, knew she would never be picked. Not when every Omega around her had the scent of a mate, the spark of connection that called to the alphas. But Emily, she had nothing. As she watched the other girls stand proud and eager, Emily's heart sank. She couldn't even bring herself to approach the ceremony, not when she knew the cruel truth. The world didn't want her. She was too weak. She was nothing. Just as the last Omega was chosen, the Alpha King arrived. Alexander Thornridge, the feared and revered ruler of the Northern Territories. His presence alone silenced the crowd. His silver eyes swept across the ceremony, cold and calculating, his every step commanding respect. Emily had never seen him up close before. Tall and imposing, Alexander was a legend, a king who ruled with both fear and respect. He had crushed every rival that came his way, and yet, Emily could feel his gaze lingering on her. She didn't understand why. Was it curiosity? Pity? Or something more? As the ceremony came to an end, Alexander made his way toward the exit, but then, something unexpected happened. He stopped in front of Emily. The others watched in stunned silence. His eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, something shifted. The world around them faded, and it was just the two of them standing in the middle of the gathering. You, Alexander's voice was low, almost a growl. You are not like the others. Emily's heart raced, but she could barely comprehend what was happening. She was nothing special. She had nothing to offer. But still, Alexander reached out, extending a hand to her. Come with me, he commanded. The weight of his words was undeniable. Emily, for the first time in her life, felt something stir within her. It wasn't fear. It was something different, something she had never felt before. A pull. A connection. With a trembling hand, she took his, unsure of where this path would lead, but knowing that for the first time, someone saw her as more than just the broken Omega. The shadows around them seemed to shift as if bowing to her power, a power that had always been hidden, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The journey through the Shadowlands was unlike anything Emily had ever experienced. The trees here were ancient, their gnarled branches twisting into dark shapes that seemed to whisper secrets. The air was thick with the scent of earth and something else, something wild and untamed, like the very essence of magic itself. It felt as though the land was alive, watching her every move. Beside her, Alpha King Alexander walked with a silent, steady grace. His silver eyes never left her, though he said nothing. She could feel the weight of his presence, yet his silence was oddly comforting, as if he were allowing her to discover this place at her own pace. The path they traveled was dimly lit by the soft glow of the moon filtering through the thick canopy above. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. A mix of fear and excitement. This was no ordinary forest. This was a place where the shadows held power, where the very earth seemed to pulse with a deep, ancient magic. As they ventured deeper, the shadows seemed to grow thicker, more alive. Emily could hear them, whispers in the wind, a soft murmur like voices just out of reach. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but the longer they walked, the more distinct the voices became. They were calling to her. "You're not like the others," Alexander's voice broke through her thoughts, low and steady. Emily glanced at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The others," he continued, "they are drawn to this place, but they don't belong here." "You do." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She didn't understand what he meant. Was he saying that she had some connection to this strange, dark place? The further they walked, the more the shadows seemed to respond to her presence. The ground beneath their feet seemed to shift, as if the earth itself recognized her. It was as if the shadows bowed before her, acknowledging her in a way she could not explain. She glanced around, her heart racing. "Why?" she asked again. "Why do they listen to me?" Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her. His gaze was intense, his silver eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. Respect? Fear? "Because," he said softly, "you have a power within you that you've yet to fully understand." His words echoed in her mind, and for a moment, she felt a strange warmth growing in her chest. It was as though the shadows themselves were whispering to her, calling her to embrace whatever power she had hidden deep within. "You have been chosen," Alexander continued. "Not by me, not by anyone here. By the land itself. The shadows know you." Emily shook her head, unsure of what he was saying. "Chosen for what?" she asked, her voice trembling. But Alexander only smiled slightly, his expression unreadable. "You will find out soon enough," he said, his tone leaving no room for further questions. As they reached the heart of the Shadowlands, Emily felt an overwhelming sense of both dread and wonder. It was as if she were standing on the edge of something far greater than she could comprehend. The shadows seemed to dance around her, swirling in the air like a living, breathing entity. She had never felt so alive, so in tune with the world around her. She didn't understand what was happening, but she knew that this journey had only just begun. And whatever awaited her here in the Shadowlands, she was ready to face it. Alexander turned to her, his eyes softening for the first time since they had entered the forest. "You are more powerful than you know, Emily," he said quietly. "And I will stand by you, whatever comes." The weight of his words settled heavily in her heart. For the first time, Emily felt as though she truly belonged. The shadows were no longer just something to fear, they were a part of her, and she of them. The path through the Shadowlands grew more mysterious with each passing step. The trees that had once loomed above them like ancient sentinels now seemed to bend, their branches twisting as if reaching toward Emily. She could feel the land itself breathing, a slow, rhythmic pulse that matched the beat of her heart. The air was thick with an energy she couldn't name but that seemed to cling to her skin, urging her to move deeper. Alexander, ever watchful, walked silently beside her, his presence like a comforting shadow. Though he said little, his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, the sharp silver gaze never faltering. Emily had grown used to the silence between them, yet it no longer felt uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like a silent understanding, one that didn't need words. The deeper they ventured, the more Emily could feel the pull of something deep within her. It was as if the shadows themselves were calling her, coaxing her to uncover something hidden within. She wasn't sure if it was fear or excitement that surged through her veins, but the feeling of power growing inside her was undeniable. The whispers that had once been faint were now clearer, more distinct, as if the shadows themselves were speaking directly to her. Emily felt their words not in her ears, but in her very soul, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like an outcast. She felt as though she belonged. "This place is alive," she whispered to Alexander, her voice barely more than a breath. "It's watching us." Alexander's gaze softened as he looked at her, the hardness in his eyes momentarily melting away. "The shadows see everything, Emily. They are a part of this land, and they know you. They have always known you." His words sent a shiver down her spine, but there was no fear in his voice. Instead, there was reverence, a quiet awe. Emily couldn't help but wonder why she, of all people, had been chosen to walk this path. What was it about her that called to the shadows, that made them bow before her power? The deeper they went, the more Emily felt a strange sense of peace, as though the land had accepted her, embraced her in a way she had never felt before. The weight of the world seemed to lift from her shoulders, and for the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider. She felt powerful. "You're not like them," Alexander said again, his voice a soft rumble. "You are meant for this. You always have been." Emily wanted to ask him what he meant, but the words caught in her throat. What did he see in her that made him believe she had a power so strong, so untamed? As they continued their journey, Emily began to notice subtle changes around them. The shadows seemed to shift, reacting to her presence, their movements flowing like liquid ink. She could feel them curling around her, as though they were drawn to her in a way they never had been before. It was as if the very earth was acknowledging her, responding to the energy within her. She wasn't sure what it all meant, but she knew that whatever was happening, it was far bigger than anything she could understand. The moon above them, full and bright, cast its silvery light over the land, illuminating the path ahead. And in that light, Emily felt something stirred deep inside her, something ancient and powerful. The shadows seemed to part before her, clearing the way. She could feel them, could hear their whispers growing louder in her mind, urging her forward. "We are close," Alexander said, his voice low and serious. "The heart of the Shadowlands lies ahead. There, you will find what you seek." Emily looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. "What am I seeking?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. But Alexander only smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "You will know when you get there." The shadows parted before them, and Emily took a deep breath, stepping forward. The land seemed to pulse beneath her feet, as if it were waiting for her to make her move. And as she took her first step into the heart of the Shadowlands, she felt the power within her surge. She was no longer just an Omega. She was something more, something powerful, and she was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The heart of the Shadowlands was unlike any place Emily had ever seen. The air felt heavier here, thick with ancient magic that seemed to pulse with every breath. The ground beneath her feet was soft, covered in a layer of moss that glowed faintly in the moonlight. It was as if the very earth beneath them had come alive, responding to her presence. She could feel it in the air, the whispers growing louder, the shadows gathering closer, all watching her, waiting for her to make her move. Emily stepped forward cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. The deeper they went, the more she could feel the land shifting around her. It was as if the shadows themselves were reacting to her. Every step she took felt like a step closer to something unknown, something vast and powerful. Alexander walked silently beside her, his expression unreadable, his silver eyes scanning the surroundings, always vigilant. Despite the weight of the land around them, he remained calm, unfazed by the growing intensity of the shadows. Emily found herself wondering again about the power he had spoken of, the power within her that had yet to fully awaken. What was it? What could she do with it? She had always been told she was weak, powerless, but here, in this strange and dark place, it felt as though she were on the verge of discovering something far greater than she could have ever imagined. "Do you feel it?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander glanced at her, his expression softening just slightly. "Yes," he replied simply. "It is the land, Emily. It is alive, and it recognizes you. It has always known you." She swallowed, trying to understand his words. "But I don't understand. What does it want from me?" Alexander stopped walking, turning to face her fully. His gaze was intense, his silver eyes locking with hers. "It does not want anything from you," he said, his voice low and steady. "It is not about what it wants. It is about what you are." Emily frowned, confusion clouding her thoughts. "What I am," she repeated. Alexander nodded slowly. "You have always had power, Emily. You just did not know how to see it. This land, these shadows, they are a part of you. And now, they are waiting for you to embrace it." She felt a shiver run down her spine as his words sank in. The shadows around them seemed to respond, shifting and swirling in the air as if they had heard him too. Emily took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she reached out, feeling the air around her. For a brief moment, she felt it, a surge of warmth deep within her, a connection to the land that had been there all along, hidden beneath the surface. It was faint, but it was real. The shadows responded, curling around her, brushing against her skin in a way that felt almost intimate. She could feel the power growing within her, stirring like a sleeping giant, awakening with every passing second. "It's happening," Emily whispered to herself, her eyes wide with realization. "Yes," Alexander said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "Now, you must learn to control it. The land will teach you, but it will not be easy. You must be patient, and you must trust yourself." Emily nodded, her heart racing as she turned her gaze back to the shadows. She could feel them, feel the power surging through her veins. The world around her seemed to blur, the shadows growing darker, more intense. But instead of fear, she felt something else, a sense of calm, of knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The whispers in the air grew louder, more insistent, as if urging her forward. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes, letting the shadows embrace her, let them fill her with their energy. For the first time in her life, Emily felt alive in a way she had never known before. She felt powerful. And she knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. The land was hers to command, the shadows were hers to control, and the journey ahead would change everything she had ever known about herself. The shadows seemed to wrap around Emily, a comforting embrace that whispered secrets only she could hear. She stood still, her eyes closed, feeling the pulse of the land beneath her feet, the power within her growing stronger with every passing second. The whispers had become clearer now, the shadows no longer just moving around her, but responding to her, listening to her. Emily's heart raced as she reached out, her hands trembling slightly. The shadows stretched toward her like an extension of herself, their movements synchronized with her breath. She could feel their energy surging, their darkness weaving into her very being, and for the first time, Emily felt as if she truly belonged. Alexander watched her with a quiet intensity, his silver eyes never leaving her. He had known this moment would come, but even he couldn't deny the depth of power Emily now possessed. She was no longer the fragile Omega she had once been. She was something more, something that even the land itself recognized. "You feel it, don't you?" Alexander's voice was soft, almost a whisper, as if he were afraid the land itself might hear. Emily nodded, her eyes still closed as she allowed the shadows to guide her. "I've never felt anything like this," she said, her voice barely audible, but filled with awe. The power was unlike anything she had ever known, a force that came from the very earth beneath her, from the shadows that danced around her, and from something deep within herself that she had never understood. "This is only the beginning," Alexander said, his voice filled with both pride and caution. "The shadows will teach you, but it will not be easy. You must learn to control them, to command them. Only then will you understand what you are truly capable of." Emily opened her eyes, staring out into the vast expanse of shadowlands before her. The darkness stretched out endlessly, the shadows swirling around her like a living thing. She could feel them, hear them, their power coursing through her veins. She had always been told she was weak, that she was nothing. But now, she felt strong, stronger than she had ever imagined. "I will learn," Emily said, her voice firm with determination. She could feel the weight of the land's power on her shoulders, but it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a gift, one she was ready to embrace. "I will not fail." Alexander's gaze softened as he stepped closer to her, his presence like a shield against the world. "I know you won't," he said quietly. "You are destined for something greater than you can imagine. But you must be patient. The shadows will not give their power easily. They will test you. They will make you doubt yourself. But if you stay true to who you are, you will master them." Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words sink in. She had come so far, but the journey ahead would be filled with challenges she could not yet fathom. Still, she was ready. She was no longer afraid. She was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The shadows seemed to pulse with anticipation as if they were waiting for her next move. Emily reached out again, her hands steady as she called to them, feeling the power surge through her once more. She could feel the connection between them, the bond that had always been there, waiting to be awakened. "I'm ready," she whispered to the shadows, and they responded, their movements swift and fluid, wrapping around her like a cloak. Alexander watched in silence, a mixture of pride and caution in his gaze. Emily had taken the first step toward mastering the power within her, and though the road ahead would be difficult, he had no doubt she would succeed. This was only the beginning, and the shadows would soon reveal their true depth to her. For the first time, Emily felt truly free, free from the weight of her past, free from the chains that had once bound her. She was no longer an outcast, no longer the broken Omega. She was something more, something that even the shadows themselves bowed to. Emily's connection with the shadows had deepened in ways she had never imagined. Each day, she could feel the land shifting, responding to her, the shadows swirling and growing stronger with every breath she took. It was as if the land itself recognized her presence, as if it had always been waiting for her. She stood in the heart of the Shadowlands now, her hands raised, fingers tracing the dark energy that pulsed through the air. The shadows responded instantly, wrapping around her in fluid movements, as if they were drawn to her very being. She could feel them, their power, their ancient magic, flowing through her like a river of energy, filling her with a sense of purpose and strength she had never known before. Alexander had been watching her closely, his silver eyes studying her every movement, but he remained silent, allowing her to explore the depths of her new power. He had been patient, and now, he could see the change in her. Emily was no longer the fragile Omega she had once been. She was becoming something greater, something powerful, and Alexander could not deny the awe he felt as he watched her command the shadows with such ease. He had always known she was special, but seeing it for himself, seeing her embrace the power that had always been inside her, filled him with a sense of pride. "You are becoming one with them," he said softly, his voice breaking the silence that had settled between them. Emily opened her eyes, her heart racing at the sound of his voice. She had been so focused on the shadows, on the power swirling around her, that she had almost forgotten he was there. She turned to face him, her expression filled with wonder. It's incredible," she whispered, her voice full of awe. "I can feel it, Alexander. The power inside me, it's real. I can feel the land, the shadows, they're alive." Alexander nodded, his gaze never leaving her. "They are alive, Emily. And they are yours to command." Emily swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always felt like an outsider, like she didn't belong in the world of alphas and omegas. But here, in the Shadowlands, in this place where the shadows bowed to her, she felt like she had finally found where she was meant to be. She wasn't just an Omega anymore. She was something far more powerful. "I don't understand," she said, her voice shaky. "How do I control this? How do I use it?" Alexander stepped closer, his eyes filled with both pride and caution. "You don't control it, Emily. You learn to trust it. The shadows will guide you, but you must listen. They will show you your true potential, but only if you are willing to embrace it." Emily nodded, her hands still trembling as she reached out, allowing the shadows to swirl around her once more. She could feel their power, their energy, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of it. She embraced it, letting it fill her, letting it become a part of her. The shadows responded, their movements growing faster, more fluid, as if they were acknowledging her, recognizing her as their true master. She smiled, a sense of confidence blooming inside her. "I can feel it," she said, her voice stronger now. "I can feel them, Alexander. They're mine." Alexander smiled, a look of satisfaction in his eyes. "Yes, they are. But remember, Emily, with great power comes great responsibility. The shadows will test you. They will challenge you. But if you remain true to yourself, there is nothing you cannot achieve." Emily took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She was ready. She was no longer the weak, broken Omega. She was a force to be reckoned with, and the shadows had chosen her. She had chosen them. And together, they would change everything. Emily stood at the edge of the Shadowlands, her heart pounding with anticipation. She could feel the power coursing through her veins, the land around her alive with energy. The shadows, once mysterious and foreign, now felt like an extension of herself. They swirled at her command, waiting for her next move. She was no longer the unsure, broken Omega. She was becoming something much more, and the shadows acknowledged it. "You've come far, Emily," Alexander's voice broke the silence, his words laced with both admiration and caution. Emily turned to face him, the moonlight casting shadows across his features. His silver eyes studied her, an intensity in his gaze that sent a shiver down her spine. "What now?" she asked, her voice steady but filled with a curiosity she couldn't suppress. Alexander stepped closer, his presence calming yet commanding. "Now, you learn to wield this power. You've connected with the shadows, but there is more to it. You must learn how to use it, how to protect yourself with it." Emily's mind raced. She had always been told she was weak, a failure among her kind. But now, with the power of the shadows at her fingertips, she felt a sense of purpose, a clarity she had never known. She nodded, determination setting in. "Teach me," she said simply. Alexander gave her a small, approving smile. "It's not something that can be taught with words alone," he said. "It's a matter of trust. Trusting the shadows, trusting yourself." Emily took a deep breath, closing her eyes. She could feel the shadows swirling around her, tugging at her senses. They were waiting for her, eager to follow her lead. She reached out with her mind, letting the power flow through her. At first, it was like a whisper, a faint tug at the edges of her consciousness. But as she focused, the shadows grew stronger, more distinct. She could feel them, could see them in her mind's eye, a fluid mass of darkness that responded to her every thought. "Good," Alexander's voice was barely a whisper, but it filled her with confidence. "Now, try to shape them." Emily's brow furrowed as she concentrated. She raised her hand, imagining the shadows taking form. Slowly, the darkness around her shifted, moving in response to her will. She could feel the shadows bending to her command, curling around her fingers like smoke. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. "You're doing well," Alexander said, his tone soft but filled with approval. "But you must learn to control it, not just shape it." Emily's focus tightened. She closed her eyes again, this time allowing the shadows to flow through her completely. She felt them, alive inside her, a part of her. She let go of the fear, the uncertainty, and allowed the power to fill her, to guide her. When she opened her eyes, the shadows around her were no longer just a response to her will. They were an extension of herself, flowing freely, as though they were one with her. She could feel their depth, their ancient magic, their potential. She could feel the land itself in them, the centuries of power that had been waiting for someone like her to unlock it. "This is only the beginning," she whispered to herself, the weight of her words settling in. She had always felt like an outsider, like she didn't belong. But here, in the heart of the Shadowlands, she felt more connected than ever. The shadows had chosen her, and she had chosen them. And together, they would change everything. Alexander watched her closely, his expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, pride, perhaps, or something deeper. "You've come a long way," he said quietly. "But there is still much to learn. You are not just connected to the shadows. You are part of them, and they are part of you. That is a bond that must be nurtured." Emily nodded, her heart swelling with both excitement and uncertainty. She had come far, but the road ahead was long, and the shadows were far deeper than she had imagined. But she was ready. She was no longer just the broken Omega. She was a force of nature, and she would learn to wield the power of the shadows to its fullest. Together, they would rise, and nothing would stand in their way. Emily stood in the heart of the Shadowlands, the cool night air surrounding her like a cloak. The power she had tapped into in the past few days was growing stronger, more familiar, and the shadows responded to her every command with increasing ease. They wrapped around her like an old friend, each movement becoming smoother, more precise. Her connection with them was no longer something she needed to concentrate on, it had become instinctive. With a single thought, the shadows swirled around her hands, twisting and curling as she willed them to move. She could feel their energy, ancient and untamed, and for the first time in her life, she felt in control. Alexander watched her from a distance, his arms crossed over his chest as he observed her progress. His silver eyes glinted in the moonlight, a mixture of pride and something deeper, perhaps concern, perhaps wonder. Emily could feel his gaze on her, but it didn't distract her. The shadows were her focus, and they were waiting for her to lead them. "You've come far, Emily," Alexander said, his voice carrying across the quiet expanse of the Shadowlands. Emily turned to him, a small smile on her lips. "I can feel them, Alexander. They're part of me now." She paused, her brow furrowing as she studied the shifting shadows around her. "But there's something more, isn't there?" Alexander nodded slowly, his gaze softening. "Yes, there is. You've mastered the surface, but the deeper magic is still to be uncovered." Emily's heart skipped a beat at his words. "What do you mean?" she asked, a mixture of curiosity and trepidation in her voice. Alexander stepped closer, his footsteps silent on the moss-covered ground. "The shadows are only a part of this land's power. To truly understand what you can do, you need to connect with the deeper currents of magic that flow beneath the surface. It will take time, and it will take trust. Trust in yourself, and trust in the land." Emily felt a surge of determination. She had already come so far, and she was not about to stop now. "How do I connect with this deeper magic?" she asked, her voice steady. Alexander's expression was unreadable as he looked at her, his gaze piercing. "You must surrender to it, Emily. The land will show you the way, but only if you let go of your fears. Only if you let go of your doubts." She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. She had never been good at letting go of control, at surrendering to anything or anyone. But here, in the Shadowlands, she had already learned to trust the shadows. Could she trust herself to embrace even more? "I'll do it," she said firmly, her voice unwavering. Alexander nodded approvingly. "Good. Trust in the land, and in the shadows. And remember, this power isn't just about what you can do for yourself. It's about what you can do for the world around you. You will need to protect it, guide it, and sometimes, you will have to make sacrifices." Emily nodded, the weight of his words settling deep in her chest. She had always felt like an outsider, like she didn't belong in the world of alphas and omegas. But now, with the shadows at her command, she felt as though she was exactly where she was meant to be. The deeper magic was waiting for her, and she would embrace it. She would learn to master it, to wield it, to protect the world around her with it. As the night stretched on, the shadows seemed to grow heavier, more oppressive. Emily closed her eyes and took a deep breath, letting the darkness fill her senses. She could feel the deeper magic now, a current flowing beneath her feet, pulling her in, urging her to follow it. She opened her eyes, and for the first time, she understood. She wasn't just controlling the shadows. She was a part of them, a part of this land, and together, they would change the world. The shadows responded to her. Flowing around her, their energy merging with hers, and for a moment, she felt invincible. She was no longer the weak, broken Omega. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she would not stop until she had unlocked the full extent of her power. The air around Emily hummed with an energy she had never felt before. The deeper magic flowed through her veins like liquid fire, and as she stood in the heart of the Shadowlands, she felt a connection with everything, every whisper of the wind, every rustle of the leaves, every flicker of the shadows. It was as if she were no longer just a part of the world but had become one with it. The shadows wrapped around her, their presence no longer intimidating but reassuring, like a cloak of protection. She could feel the power within her, raw and untamed, yet strangely calming. It was a power that had always been inside her, waiting for the right moment to awaken, and now that moment had come. She was no longer the Omega that had been discarded. She was something far more powerful. Something that even the land itself acknowledged. "You're learning quickly," Alexander's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to see him standing a few paces away, his expression serious but filled with pride. "The shadows respond to you as if they've always known you. But remember, they are not your servants. They are your partners. You must learn to work with them, not control them." Emily nodded, absorbing his words. She had already begun to understand that the deeper magic wasn't something to dominate, but something to coexist with. She reached out a hand, and the shadows swirled in response, their movement fluid and graceful. It felt as if they were communicating with her, speaking to her in a language she was just beginning to understand. "It feels so alive," Emily whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Like they're a part of me." Alexander stepped closer, his gaze softening. "They are a part of you. And you are a part of them. The bond you share with the shadows is unique. It will guide you, but only if you are patient enough to listen." Emily felt a sense of calm settle over her. The shadows weren't something to fear, something to hold at arm's length. They were an extension of herself. A reflection of her inner strength. She had always been taught to hide her power, to suppress it, but here, in the Shadowlands, she realized that she had never needed to hide. She only needed to embrace it. As she stood there, letting the shadows curl around her, she felt her connection with the land deepening. The more she allowed herself to trust the magic, the more it responded. It was as though the land itself had been waiting for her to awaken, to claim her place as its guardian. She could feel the land's heartbeat, steady and strong, beneath her feet. "What's next?" Emily asked, turning to Alexander, her voice steady now. "What do I do with all of this?" Alexander's silver eyes met hers, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. "You are ready for the next step," he said, his voice low. "The shadows are just the beginning. There are other forces at play in this world, forces that you will need to understand and control. But you have the strength to do it. The question is, are you ready to accept the responsibility that comes with it?" Emily felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. She had come so far, but this was a new challenge, one that would require more than just mastering the shadows. It would require her to confront the unknown, to step into a world of power and politics that she had never been a part of. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She had the shadows. She had the land. And she had herself. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm with conviction. "I'll face whatever comes next." Alexander gave her a small, approving smile. "Then let us begin." The shadows shifted around them, a sign that the journey was only just beginning. Emily knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she also knew that with the shadows by her side, there was nothing she couldn't face. She was no longer the weak Omega. She was a force of nature, and she would carve her own destiny in this world, no matter what it took.